I'd like to introduce to the stage Mr. Peter Landeros. Peter is the official spokesperson for the Piscataway Indian Nation. He is also the director for the Eastern Woodlands Territory Support Band of the American Indian Movement, and he is our new Commissioner of Indian Affairs under the Moore administration. Peter?
Thank you, Peter. To start out this conversation, the first thing we're going to do is the land acknowledgement for the Mattapique people who used to be here. This is their land that we're on, and we have to honor them and give them the due respect because they're the original stewards of this land. And saying that, I also want to say there isn't a place that you can put your feet down that isn't Indian land. Remember that. And the reason why we are here is because from this date forward, we want to be included in all planning and all aspects of the government so that our voices are heard. Back to Peter Brooks.
So guys, this is what making history feels like. Whatever that feeling is you have in your stomach, this is what we want you to share with your communities when you go back. Because this is a historic moment for us as a nation, because prior to this meeting, the only planning we feel that had to do with the Piscataways was about removal. And so now that each of you are willing to at least listen and make some type of gesture of interest and commitment into changing that narrative is historic. Each of you are history makers, and we appreciate your coming here. Planners, you control our future, so we take you very, very seriously. And I think each of you deserves a round of applause just for being here today. I acknowledge you, and thank you. I thank you because it's been a long time. So for most of you, when you do history and stuff like that, it starts at colonization. And so we're here to introduce ourselves and tell you that you can start with our history now. And these are some of the people who can tell you that history. I'm joined, as you introduced, from Mr. Peter Landeros, and then Mr. Lynn Harris from the Salagi tribe, Cherokee. Lynn, would you like to say some words?
Yeah, my name is Lynn Harris, and I'm the past chairperson for the American Indian Alaskan Native Advisory Council for the federal government. I'm retired, but I'm still connected with the different indigenous natives all over the United States and Alaska. And I keep in close contact with them, and down the road we'll have certain events and ceremonies and so forth. And thank you for coming here today to be with us.
Oh. And Tom Bradshaw. Tom is from the Nassau-Wawash tribe, which is here on the Eastern Shore. So you had 4 Indians in your room and didn't know it. And so this is part of the history. So if you can see this map, this is basically what John Smith saw when he first came here. As you can see, he first started in the Jamestown area, and if you could see the map, and the map is available at the Maryland State Archives, you would see a whole bunch of little villages or tribes or communities represented along here. It gets more sparse as he comes into the Chesapeake Bay about 3 or 4 years after he landed in Jamestown. He decided to go north. It becomes sparse because everyone's fleeing him. They don't want to contact him after the Pocahontas disaster and stuff like that. But there is a tribe that waits for him, it's sort of planned meeting. That is the Susquehannock tribe, and we'll get to that in just a second. So this loose confederation of tribes and tribal people who call themselves Piscataway, have lived on these lands for countless generations. The Piscataway refer to ourselves as the people from the place where the waters blend, up above the rapids. So it seems just like the water. The Piscataway people come from the earth itself. And this is not unique. Most American Indian tribes have a name that associates the origin of the people with the earth itself. Whoops, sorry about that. As an example, Lynn's tribe, Salagi, Cherokee, means the people from the caves, the people who dwell in the caves. The Anishinaabe are the people of the earth, so it's not uncommon. The place that we currently call Baltimore would have been called Patapscut, or the place of jutting rocks. And so our presence here today is to ask you how much more meaningful it is for your children when they go into an admissions office or in a national meeting to say, I come from the place where the rocks reach for the sky, as opposed to saying Baltimore, which is a person's name that we may not ever have any association with. By going back to the original name, you give the children a reason to love the place where they come from. It's a unique characteristic that you can't find, elsewhere in the region. So this is why we're here. The Eastern Woodlands tribes still retain a philosophy that is very utilitarian. As an example of what I mean, these tribes would not have traveled very far from their original homeland. That's because their grandparents are buried in this land. And so I'm not going to wander far because I want to be with my grandparents, when I go into the earth as well. And so that's why, even to this day, it's doubtful that the Piscataway Indian Nation would have gone to Europe or gone to Africa. It's just not our thing. But according to all, the stories, all of these tribes were pretty much under the Piscataway. This is a great confederacy of tribes. They are under respected leaders who they rely on for wisdom, diplomacy, guidance, advice, jurisprudence. This is the role of the Tayak. And these qualities, coupled with inclusion and reverence for the land and maintenance of the spiritual and cultural traditions, such as the ceremonies, have been embodied by the lineage of Tayak chiefs that have led the Piscataway through the history of time until today. As this map shows, the Piscataway Empire at one time, 1492, extended from parts of Virginia through Pennsylvania and into New York. And I know Wes Moore probably wishes he was governor of that empire as opposed to what we have today. I don't know. But it's an interesting thing. This map comes as a result of the ambassador of the Piscataway Indian Nation explaining that the Susquehannock tribe were originally under the Tayak. Our current Tayak, Mark Tayak. Mark is the 29th hereditary chief of the Piscataway Indian Nation, okay? His empire, if you will, was not maintained through military acquisition. He's no Napoleon. His parents were instead it starts, we think, at about 700 or 800 AD, or CE as they say now. And the allegiance of such a large swath of geography comes from the honor, the mutual consent, the familiarity, the recognition, the generational acknowledgement that this is a chief, okay? And it still exists today, it still retains regional authority. So there are many tribal communities identified in Maryland, and all of these communities shared that freedom and independence and liberty that all of your ancestors came here to experience and that you enjoy today. In my view, the only way to look at the colonization is to imagine as some kind of natural disaster. So the Tayak is not just our political leader, he is our spiritual leader. So when he is deposed by his own brother at the direction of the early Marylanders, it throws the entire empire into chaos because of the nature of it and the fact that we've lost our leader. Now, if you recall at that time, when the British came here, they wore red coats and white shirts, right? Native Americans were in camouflage. We seek to blend in with our environment. So when people say today that there are no Native Americans in Maryland or no Native Americans in West Virginia, it's because we blended in. Just like we did today. We were sitting amongst you and you didn't know we were here. So there are Indian communities that have survived, and that's what we're here to tell you, because we know a lot of the information you get says that we don't exist. So yeah, we lost about 90% of the empire to influenza, smallpox. We never had the bubonic plague. We never domesticated animals, no chickens, cats, anything like that. Animals were free. So all those diseases that you were accustomed to, we had no defense for at that time. But since then, even today, leaders and bands of the Piscataway, their relatives, were running from here to New York and elsewhere to find refuge. There are Piscataway all across the eastern woodlands. There's even a band of Piscataway that returned from the Battle of Fallen Timbers in Ohio in 1794. From there, at least in, here's some of the maps you'll see. Don't even mention the fact that there are Piscataway Indians. In this one, the name Kanoi is a name that was given to us by other people, all right? So you'll hear Kanoi all the time, but this map is consistent. The Piscataway Empire would have gone from Maryland up through, if the Susquehannocks were subordinate, up through Pennsylvania and into New York. So from that time, and this is a picture of me and my grandmother, we've been hiding in plain sight. Some of us in black communities. Lynn and I, our families are from Sandtown, Winchester, which is the highest density of African Americans anywhere just about. So yeah, we hid out in black communities. The same thing happens to the Lenape who are in Delaware, in Middleton, Delaware, and stuff like that. But because for them, if you told them you were an Indian, it was a bad thing. When I say that this is changing the narrative, our most recent encounter with the government and stuff was the Indian Removal Act of 1830. That was like the big, so since then we're looking for opportunities to rectify. Today, the Tayak maintains regional authority. He is still a spiritual and political leader. He sets an example for us through economic development. If you go to a powwow, you may find the Tayak there selling jewelry. He's setting an example. He maintains all of our culture, all of our history, our traditions. To say that being the Piscataway Tayak is the most important or oldest seat in Maryland is probably unfair, because his empire also includes parts of Virginia and Pennsylvania, and what he does and decides impacts people in North Carolina. Part of the reason why the Lumbees are in Baltimore is because the Tayak went down and brought them up from Baltimore. And so it's hard to gauge the impact of the Tayak, but you can bet if a UFO or some foreign person came into Wilkes-Barre or Harrisburg or even Elmira, New York, on down through here into the coast of Virginia, into Lorton and stuff, they would have taken that person to see the Tayak, because the Tayak would know what to do. He was sort of the ultimate authority for the people, all right? The Piscataways have never forgotten their bond to the land and to the water. The Piscataway Indian nation of today still heeds the instructions of our ancestors. We have never left. We still safeguard our sacred sites. We are incredibly resilient and relevant. And no matter what Marylanders say, you are a part of our heritage. All right, let that sink in for a little while. We date back like 10,000, 15,000 years. You're coming in the past 300 years or so. So you're like a chapter in our book, even though right now it looks like we're a footnote in your book. It's actually the other way around, I would argue. So it's part of your heritage. It's part of your inheritance, these Indians, us Indians. Just like the Allegheny Mountains and the Chesapeake Bay, we were here before you. And just as you take care of those things as a natural resource, so are these natural resources for you as well, for economic development, for community stability, all kinds of things that we add. I mean, you've got to admit, the Eastern Woodland Indians practiced sustainability and ecology and conservation at a very high level for human beings. So there's a lot of expertise in there. And finally, I would argue that this is really your responsibility because it's tied to your destiny. Here's Mark with his father, Billy. The previous slide was Turkey Tayak. Because when you include Native Americans, the Piscataway Indian Nation, in your planning, you're not just acknowledging us and your roots as human beings, that we're fellow human beings, but in engaging your history, you're engaging your future. Because see, for us, it is the rivers and the mountains who tell our stories. See, for you, it's the books and the internet, but for us, it's the rivers and the mountains. So we're part of this land. And so that's what we wanted to reiterate to you. Billy Tayak, Nietzsche Tayak will be the next Tayak, the 30th Tayak, God willing, his grandson. So with that, I'd like to introduce Peter Landeros. Peter will discuss with you, I've just discussed with you the Piscataway Indian Nation, all right? There are a bunch of tribes in Maryland, like 7 or so, that the state of Maryland recognizes in some of that history. Peter is about to go over the statewide history for you. Peter?
Okay. Throughout the state of Maryland, you have multiple tribes, state-recognized tribes that exist, from the Nasha-Wawash to the other tribes down in the southern part of the Eastern Shore, from the Powhatan to
Iconic.
yeah. And what you have to remember is a lot of these tribes are state tribes, recognized tribes, because they didn't have treaties with the federal government. Their original treaties were with the British government before the Revolutionary War. And they've been penalized for that and not allowed to become federally recognized tribes because their treaties weren't written to the colonial government that existed after the Revolutionary War. In stating that, you have to remember that there isn't, I said this earlier, there isn't a place on this map that isn't Indian land originally. And there isn't a place that you guys want to talk about planning this and doing that on the land that we should not be contacted about and informed about. Because we've run into issues where remains have been found. We have run into issues where artifacts, pieces of pottery, jewelry, and all this stuff have been found. And these tribes in the state of Maryland need to be contacted about that, okay? Even though it states in federal law that whatever's the closest federal tribe needs to be contacted, that needs to be changed. And the state of Maryland could be the first state to say, we're gonna recognize our state tribes and remember that we're here. I personally come from a federally recognized tribe called the Pasquayakis from southern Arizona. But my family moved here in 1973, and I've been here ever since. I grew up around the Piscataway Indian Nation. I know my traditions, I know Piscataway Indian Nation traditions. you have a lot of different places that people may look at and say, oh, we can't do anything with this land, swampland, dense forests, all that's homeland and can be used with the proper knowledge and know-how. And we as indigenous nations know what to do with land like this and how to cultivate it and make it prosperous to where a lot of people just don't have that knowledge. The Piscataway Indian people from the southern Maryland area have been there for thousands and thousands of years, okay, way before any contact ever made here. And they're not a part of what the government or planning that has happened to this date in this state. And we are here to make sure that that stops, that we are now included in everything that happens in this state. Because before it was your state, it was Piscataway, it was other tribes from this nation state, and we need to know what's going on. We need to be honored in what's going on. We need to have more signage throughout the state that what tribes originally existed in the area, where you have the Nashawawash from down here, okay? There should be signs everywhere honoring us as a people, because without us, the colonized people who came from Britain and France, who colonized this area, would never survived. Without us, you wouldn't have the crops that you have now that are grown here in the Eastern Shore. Okay, so acknowledging us as a people that we're still here is a big step and part of that planning. Okay, and never forget that you have this gentleman here who I'm going to go up and shake his hand.
Oh,
Who's a Navy veteran. Thank you, sir.
okay.
My father was in SEAL Team 2. We as indigenous people have fought in every war of this country. And not even that's acknowledged, except for the code talkers from out west. And thanks to them, this isn't part of Japan.
Kill.
So when we want to talk history, there are some ugly things that are going to be said. It's not said to degrade anybody or to shame anybody. It is said as a reminder that this shouldn't happen again. And as long as we're not included in the planning of every day-to-day things in the state of Maryland, it could happen again.
Yep.
So when you look at this map here from Montgomery County, Howard County, Baltimore, the Susquehannock, that river played a major part in traveling up and down this East Coast region into the central East Coast. And all the goods it brought down from that area to this area. So all we're asking is for a voice from this day forward in the planning and the day-to-day things for the state of Maryland. As now that I sit on the Commission for Indian Affairs, this is one of the things that I'm going to ask that the Commission be involved in. I am the spokesperson for the Piscataway Indian Nation. I would like to be invited to all events that the state of Maryland are being held so that we can have a voice. Because it's important. We can't forget that we're here. There has to be some acknowledgement that we still exist. And that took a lot of effort on our part, because the federal government has done everything they can to make us go away. From the sterilization of our women, to introduction of diseases to us that we had no immunity for. And even today, with the denial of the state-recognized tribes here in the state of Maryland for federal recognition is part of that plan, I believe, because it'll open up these indigenous communities for benefits that the federal government doesn't want to spend money on. And part of that, we can do so much to show all this that you're seeing here on the screen if we had the acknowledgement that we are still here and that we had our own places to do our own things. Imagine if there was an Indian center somewhere in southern Maryland or here on the Eastern Shore that anybody can go to at any point in time to learn about the tribes from the state of Maryland and to learn the history. To see events that could happen there every year, repeatedly, over and over again. Powwows, round dances. Sometimes we just have potluck dinners where we have a circle dance, or we can start teaching our own traditions to our own people again in our own space. These aren't impossible things to ask for, but they've always fallen on deaf ears.
Yep.
And we're not going to let that happen anymore. Not why I sit on a commission, and not why I am a spokesperson for the Piscataway Indian Nation. I come from a strong warrior family and a strong warrior people, and I will stand up for what's right for us, whether you want to hear me or not. I will let my voice be heard. And when I say my voice, I also include all my ancestors who stand behind me. And even though I'm from a southwestern tribe, the Piscataway Indian Nation are my people.
That's right.
One tribe, one nation, one voice. And if we can include the other people from the state of Maryland in that statement, we can do a lot. Because we still have things that we could teach you when it comes to this land on how to take care of it so you're not stripping it of all the minerals and everything and all that. How come we as Indians can farm the same land for thousands of years and still have things grow on it? Where today, a farmer has to jump from plot to plot to plot to plot. Question yourself with that. Okay? Why is it that we were able to have cities and communities that stood for thousands of years and never had the issues of flooding and trash and everything else that goes on in the different areas of this state, with Baltimore, Annapolis, and everything and all that? Because we knew where to build outside of the floodplains. We knew how to make things work so that the water ran past what we were doing, instead of saying, oh, they're just going to put it here. We don't care. Okay? And to include us with every step of your planning from now on, I think could make a big difference. In hearing our voice, you'll understand that our history isn't that much different than a lot of other people's history. To where you can talk about the Irish and some of those who were really prosecuted in Europe before they came here. The Pilgrims and how they were prosecuted before they came here, before they started doing the same thing to us that England was doing to them. So in talking about this, it allows us to be able to learn from the past and hopefully build a really strong future together.
Yeah, together.
And allow us what we need to grow as a community, which in turn will make this whole state a better place.
Yeah.
Right. We bring back up Peter Brooks. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of looking at the importance of Native American people, one of the things I always point out in terms of the military is the fact that the United States would not even have a military if it weren't for Native Americans. I mean, think about it. If we weren't here, who would you have to fight? You could just settle, you know? So that's how far back we go. And again, when the first Europeans came here, they wore red coats and, you know, white shirts. But who was wearing camouflage? The Native people. And today, not a single US service person leaves this country without camouflage. It's an integral part of what we do. Yeah, we brought that to you. The fact that you have a VA. There's no Veterans Administration in Europe, in Russia today. They saw the way that we treated our warriors, our veterans, and then decided. And by the way, Peter has a powwow for the veterans coming November 11th at Bowie State University. And so you'll see, this is the first time we're allowed to honor our warriors here in the state. And we hope that it becomes the official or an official state ceremony. But yeah, that's what we're about. You know, the history of the powwow is our warriors coming back to the village. They would call for their best regalia and clothing, and as they came in with their victory spoils, we would beat the drums and they would dance their story of victory. And that's the origin of the powwow. And it's a beautiful ceremony that you all can do in all your communities. We can organize it for you. It's not that difficult. And it's a great experience for your children, for you. We help anchor you into this land. We show you ways to strengthen your communities, and we're a very inclusive people, you know? And so these are all really good lessons for Americans to understand. Now, I want you to go over this. I want to go over this first, and I hope you can see it. So this map is the Lakota world view, all right? It's a representation of it. So the reason why I'm showing this is because every tribe has a world view. But somehow we as Marylanders are going to have to solicit this from the local tribes in the community that you come from. So in this map, notice North America is upside down, right? But the name of it is Kiawita, which means Turtle Island. Turtle Island. And folks, what is the animal for Maryland? You guys are at the center, you know what I mean, of Native American history here. This state has a tremendous amount. Anyone here from Western Maryland? West Virginia. This is Shawnee people, you know. That means Tecumseh was in the state of Maryland. Tecumseh is a mythical figure in American history, a legend. And we have the opportunity to take advantage of that before West Virginia and Ohio, you know, because you invited us to this meeting. Thank you, Joseph. So, Lakota Mokoche, the land of the Lakota people. Milahanska Tamakochi, land of the people with the long knives. Long knife land. That's the United States. Tunkashila Oti, Washington, D.C., means grandfather's home. Grandfather's home. Tunkashila Oti. Unchiapi Makoche, grandmother's land, referring to the Queen of England, grandmother's land, Canada. Osni Makoche, the cold land, referring to Alaska. Spaula Makoche, the Spanish people's land, the people who speak Spanish. Spaula Atuanje, the Spanish people's place or city, okay? So it's a sort of a reorienting thing when you look at things from a Native American perspective. This map shows you some of the names of the places prior to. As we pointed out, Baltimore, Patapscut, meaning place of jutting rocks. Philadelphia, Coaquanac, meaning the place of tall pines, or place of eels, Shakamatsu, place of eels. Syracuse, New York. Diana Den Dunk, at the good place. At the good place. Charlottesville, Virginia. Shallow water. Washington, D.C., Nacotchtank. Good trading place. Good trading place, Washington, D.C. New York City, Manhattan. Place where good bows are made. Place where good bows come from. Anyone know the name Wicomico? Wicomico County in Maryland? Anyone know what that means? Place of good dwellings, many homes built there. Okay, Wicomico. So all of these places have a history. One of my favorite, Miami, Tequestev, the people of the good earth. The people of the good earth. All right, best practices for working with Native Americans in Maryland. Oh, by the way, with that previous one, you may consider in your municipalities asking us if you might return to a pre-colonial name. Again, because I think as a child growing up in a place where the rocks reach for the sky, it's much more prestigious. It gives me a lot more cachet. It gives me a lot more pride in the place I come from. So please consider that as you go back as planners. But when you work with Native Americans, like Peter and Lynn and Tom, be respectful. Lead with your intention or your motivation. Especially if you make an error, just go back to what your intention was, all right? It won't absolve you of the error entirely, but at least it mitigates it somewhat, you know? Listen and learn. Let the tribal people tell their story. Even if it contradicts everything you know and have learned, just let them tell their story. Listen. Be respectful. The best thing when working with a tribe, you can send an email, but you're gonna have to follow up with a phone call or ideally a visit. Now, I know a visit because these are people's personal homes, like the chief of the Nasse-Wawash, Donna Abbott. So the best time for you to integrate yourself really is at the powwows. Most tribes have at least one social event that is open to the public, and that's the best time to go there, meet the chiefs, meet the leaders, and stuff like that. And it's also just a great event to be a part of. If you want to be an ally, actively support our struggle. Actively advocate for Native American issues and stuff like that. We would like to see some of these rivers renamed. Anyone here from Harford County? Harford County, Gunpowder River. All right, so yeah, there's opportunities there. You know, we can decolonize these things and present ourselves as Americans as more people of peace and reconciliation rather than gunpowder and violence and stuff. So yes, this is an opportunity. And speak up, even when scared. Transfer the benefits of your privilege to those who have less. That is an allied thing of Native American. You want to understand Native American philosophy? It is by sharing, we win. We believe in sharing what we have. So when you share, you are honoring our people by doing that. Acknowledge when you're speaking that the conversation is not about you, all right? A lot of times people will come up to us, how can you ever forgive us for what, you know, we weren't there, we're just trying to figure this out too. It's not really about you, it's about us and how we can all figure this out together. And so we get that a lot, sort of. Words to never use. So I am what they would call a we sort Indian, all right? This is a term that is specific to the state of Maryland. We are called we sort because it stands for we are sort of this and we are sort of that. We are mixed people. We're sort of black, sort of white, sort of Indian. So we have the opportunity to choose how we're going to identify. And so we represent that philosophy that you are what you think you are, you know? And so this is really important for children to understand in terms of their identity. Now, we sort is not a good term to use when you meet a person like me. You won't say, oh, you're one of the we sorts. See, it's kind of an insult, you know? There are other terms along the eastern seaboard. Redbone is one. Jackson White is one they use in in New Jersey. Redskin, Redbone, Savage. If you have any names like Savage, they probably refer to us, and you may want to consider changing them. Squaw is another term. And you see Deb Haaland is taking a lot of leadership in renaming these places across the country, and we know that you can do it. Some words you do want to use: native, traditional, honor, heritage, sacred land. The people from the precinct said, this is God's land. Really? All right, we agree with you. Yeah, we agree, it's God's land. Earth. Earth is a big term in Native American culture. You're speaking of the earth. Settler. Wasichu. Wasichu is the name given to the Europeans. It means those who take the best for themselves. This is how we differentiate an Indian from a non-Indian. Do you give the best to others as an Indian, or do you take the best for yourself as a settler? We are all related. Very good term to use. That's the core of our philosophy. You know, the Christian faith, they say, Jesus died for your sins. The Hindu faith, you live over and over again. Ours, we are all related. Man belongs to the earth. Another good phrase to use. Some of the terms you should know. State-recognized tribe, all right? This is different from a federally recognized tribe. Maryland has no federally recognized tribes. Virginia has four, five, something like that. The state of Virginia gave its tribes a state park that they could reinterpret to tell their story. So there is one state park in Virginia where all the story of, like we went through, the story of all the tribes is in that park. Virginia also has Williamsburg. You guys are the planners, you know, come on. This would really help us out. It would be economic development for the tribe if we had living history like that. As Peter pointed out, state-recognized tribes have agreements with the King of England, like the Maryland tribes, like the Pequots, like the Mattapanais. These are all Eastern tribes. By the time George Washington's government was established, we were dispersed. We lost our central government. That's why we're not recognized by the federal government. So all the tribes you've heard of, like the Lakota or the Sioux and the Shawnee and the Comanche, these tribes were at war with the federal government. That's why they're recognized. The early Bureau of Indian Affairs was the Department of War. We were never at war with you, really. An unrecognized tribe, what is called, it can also be called a corporation posing as an Indian nation, when people form a tribe on their own that's not really historically based. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, it's still on the books. Basically, it is illegal to be Native American this side of the Mississippi. If you are found to be a Native American in this part of the country, you are to be removed to the west or shot on sight. This justified all of the killings that happened prior to that. The Indian Religious Freedom Act of 1978, we probably would not be standing here if it weren't for that act. All of our religion is practiced in secrecy and private. You have to get an invitation, basically. But the Religious Freedom Act changed that. It meant our religion was no longer illegal. Wearing feathers like this was considered Indianism, and that was against the law in the United States. You could be arrested for Indianism, practicing Indianism. This is one of the things we're trying to bring back, is that Indianism. Patapscut, Baltimore, Nacotchtank, place of good trades. Two-Spirit is another good name to know. Two-Spirit generally refers to LGBTQ people, all right? But not necessarily. A person may be Two-Spirit just because of their race or something like that. But Two-Spirit have specific roles, LGBTQ people in our community. One of the roles is diplomacy. So you may get a Two-Spirit sent to your initial meetings. Don't take it any kind of way, it's just traditional. Two-Spirits also did things like naming. There are also specific roles for them within ceremonies that have to do with fertility and stuff like that. Traditional. The Piscataway Indian Nation are what's called traditional Indians. We still do the sweat lodge. We still do the Sundance. We still do the pipe ceremony, all right? So when you hear Piscataway Indian Nation, think traditional. Piscataway Conoy, more Catholic, assimilationist, etc. Some of the other tribes, like the Nase Wawash, they will have traditional people and they'll have non-traditional people. It's a little bit complicated, but that's how you can test how much a person knows. You can say, are you traditional? And if they say, no, I'm not traditional, then you'll know that they don't really have, they may not, they may be a scholar or something, but medicine, something that's good. We often say, this is good medicine. It is good medicine for me to hear your thoughts, is a good example. Pipe ceremony, that may be an initial request to the tribe. A pipe ceremony is a traditional diplomatic meeting when an agreement is expected. The agreement is sealed by the pipe ceremony, the peace pipe. The pipe is considered the leader. It points the way for the tribes. And so the pipe ceremony is really important. Talking circle. Talking circle is the way we build the community. Each person has the talking stick. For the time they have the stick, they can talk as long as they want, and they pass the stick on to another person. This way, everybody gets a chance to speak. This is a great practice if you're integrating Native people in, because we're used to that, Native Lifelines is an organization in Baltimore that provides support to the Native American community, as is the Baltimore American Indian Center. Peter Landeros introduced himself as the American Indian Movement. The American Indian Movement is our national advocacy organization, similar to the NAACP or the Jewish Defense League or something like that. And finally, TIAC. TIAC is the name of your chief here in Maryland. Chief can also be called Sachem. Throughout the northeastern part, you'll hear they refer to him as Sachem. Someone may say, who is your Sachem? You would say, our TIAC is Mark TIAC, all right? Because all of you are in TIAC territory from our perspective. That's what we call Maryland. And I think that's it. Let's see. Yeah, that's it, I think. Questions?
Practically speaking, when it comes to inclusion and planning, do you have thoughts on what that can look like in terms of local municipalities? Because the only, the only consultation process that I'm super familiar with is the FCC federal process when it comes to archaeology, where consultation is required in reference to location every time there's going to be an FCC tower put up. So I didn't know if you had an idea.
No, go ahead.
That's probably going to be federal law, and it won't apply to Maryland. Yeah, so it's going to be whichever closest federal tribe. And then we have to work with that tribe if it's our people, because they'll really be taking our stuff. So fortunately, the Piscataway Indian Nation has a really good relationship with federal tribes around here and stuff, so that can be worked out. But that's why we're here to introduce ourselves, so you know how to contact us in that process, as it begins.
Do you have ideas for I was an archaeologist and now I'm a planner. So do you have ideas as far as how to apply the same type of or a similar type of consultation to the local planning process, what that could look like, as it was referenced, being part of the process every step of the way?
So the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs publishes contact information for the various tribes. And the only thing I would recommend is contacting your local tribe and working with them. Sure. And then failing that, as the Piscataway Indian Nation, we will come in, if the local tribe is not cooperating or whatever, you can find other tribes that will come in and try to help if you can't get the local tribe. But you should at least try to give the local tribe a year. Other than that, I'm not really familiar with the process that you're describing, but that's what we're encouraging people to do here, So if you're in Western Maryland, like Garrett County, that would be the Shawnee. And if you're in Dorchester County, it would be Nassau-Wawash, Southern Maryland, Piscataway Indian Nation, etc. If that helps.
I guess to give a little context, so like within planning, if say we have a development project, like a large solar farm. I mean, there aren't any, I shouldn't say any, there's very few state or local mandates that require consultation.
That's right.
So looking at going forward and progressing that planning and adding those within regulation, like, have you thought about what that might look like, say, as far as like a development project?
I personally think that you guys should, as Peter said, invite him out or invite the nations close to you out at every opportunity you have something to be proud of, to show the Native American people we're using your land in a good way. I think it kind of begins with that. Again, I would start with going to, there's no mandate for you to include Native Americans when you're doing a sustainability project. But it's like the Secretary said, it makes sense. It just makes sense. So I don't know that we can force through legislation to require you to work with us, but we're asking you out of the goodness of your hearts because it makes sense. And we're asking you on behalf of all of our children. Remember, our civilization is not set up for people making a lot of money and, Elon Musk and stuff. Our greatest people are those who think 7 generations ahead. Right, so we're here to help you with your children. That's always our priority.
And part of the answer to what he was saying is, we don't think singular. The way that I think is I am here to better my people.
Yeah.
I'm not here to better myself. If that happens, then so be it. But the tribe comes first, always. And that's the way we look at things. I'm here not as an individual, but to represent all indigenous people of the state. And what I want to see come from this is that we as an entire people better ourselves.
Yeah, on behalf of everybody's future, everybody's.
Okay, hi. It's not on.
Oh.
Can anybody? Yeah, there it is. Oh, I apologize for that. I want to thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to reach out and include. A lot of times during the comprehensive planning process, which is really an important, and it sort of like sets the stage for whatever comes after as far as regulations are concerned. A key component of that is learning what you want to save. And our historic preservation movement we've really done a good job on that aspect of it, and we continue to work on it. But being a little more proactive in identifying the important archaeological sites, we're very fortunate in Maryland to have significant American Indian or Indian. Is American Indian the proper term for that?
That's fine.
On this shore, we have tremendous assets, religious, place-making assets, and sometimes we don't know about them, and sometimes we think we do, and the local lore talks about it. We need verification. Then it becomes something we can incorporate as a special place in our planning processes. And if we wait till the development is on our desk and we're looking for it, we've sort of missed the opportunity. Thank you again for mentioning the Great Law, that point of view that decisions need to consider 7 generations.
Yeah.
There's so much more we have to learn about the great like Iroquois Confederacy that sort of set the groundworks for our constitutional form of government.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much we have to learn, but I'm from West Virginia. I grew up with Indian names all around me. The Monongahela, the Kanawha, the Potomac. These are all. I mean, we have such a rich resource, and we don't have the stories to go with it. So you brought up some wonderful points, and I will try to reach out.
Thank you. So she's referring to the Great Law of Peace. This is also Eastern Woodlands history. So at about the year 1050, there were 5 tribes in the New York region. The Cayuga, Oneida, Seneca, Mohawk, Onondaga. All these tribes fought each other viciously for years until Hiawatha came and brought the Great Law of Peace. This is about 1050 AD. The Great Law of Peace is the government that was in operation in this part of the country up until 1776. So the Great Law of Peace brought these 5 nations together to become one. And what she's referring to is the fact that Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson both wrote how inspired they were by the democracy practiced by the Iroquois, or the 5 nations, which became the 6 nations now. It's the 6 nations in upstate New York. Now, this is important history for you as Americans, because the Iroquois government in upstate New York, the Haudenosaunee tribe, is one of the oldest running, continuously operating governments in the world. All right? We are just as old as Magna Carta and the British Empire. And all of the other governments have either been colonized or overthrown since then. So this is a very, very powerful history. And why we say it's so important for your children is the secret of their resilience is in the love for the land and the fact that we are a part of the land. And so that's the philosophy of the Great Law of Peace, that it's not your life, it's the life of the 7 generations ahead of you that you should be considering when making planning decisions. And we're always trying to think way into the future. It's sort of our style. Next question, if there is. Sure.
This does have a little, okay. My quick question was, so I think you had it on the screen earlier, so if individuals want to engage Native Americans and the Native American perspective in all the phases of planning, where do they go? Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs website?
Yes, Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs is a great place to start. Yes.
Okay. And they'll find this tribal contact list on that?
Yes, we're also going to distribute it.
Great.
As part of our materials, but the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs publishes a tribal contact list. It is also a great place to start when you need help. You can also attend the commission meetings. They're open to the public to see if it's right for you or see who the players are, and you can approach them individually. But that's the official Maryland place to start, is the Commission on Indian Affairs. You can also start with your local tribes and start to form a relationship there.
We'll also be posting all presentations and video recordings of these. Yeah. It may take us a couple weeks, but you'll get it.
Another
send
question?
Them to you too.
We had a question in the back.
Tom! Speak, brother. You should be up here with us.
No, to kind of expound on the lady over there who was an archaeologist and now a planner. We should be asked, in a big project like a solar project, is this area some of your sacred sites? Is this an area that you go to worship? Is this an area that you know that the ancestors were buried? Will their journey be interrupted if we disturb the ground? Right. That's the kind of things that we need to take into account. We have a rich history in Maryland, in Dorchester, where I'm from especially. Everything from pre-contact, contact history to colonial, Revolutionary War, and I could go on. But, when looking at projects, there are a vast number of recorded archaeological sites. Take that into consideration before you start these projects. Are you going to disturb an important site that's important to us, to the African American community, and so on? That's what we need to be cognizant of as we move forward in making planning decisions.
Inclusion, yes. Go on.
And I do want to make this one statement, and it has to do with our ancestors. We are the only people in this country that it is okay for our ancestors' remains to be displayed in museums. Why? Because there's no communication between us and those people. And it also has to deal with greed, the almighty dollar that we have no use for as a people. Yes, it's important, but it's not the most important thing. Okay? I was at the Smithsonian Institute warehouse last month where they have a whole section as big as this room of remains of people from this state that we want to have back and have a place to put so that our ancestors can lay at rest. Because we believe as long as they're in those boxes and in that warehouse, they can't rest.
That's right.
So these are some of the things that can be opening up for planning and talked and acknowledge that this happened and to move forward to rectify this. Federal law states all those remains have to go back to a federally recognized tribe. Well, we have proof they all came from the village of Mayung in Akakeet, Maryland, which is Piscataway Indian Nation. And that's who say they should go back to, not a federally recognized tribe in Virginia or out west. And what the Planning Commission can help us is the plan for a place that we can have in Akakeet, Maryland, or somewhere in the state of Maryland, that we can put our ancestors to rest.
Yes. And remember, from our perspective, you guys are the third government, the third nation here. Piscataway Indian Nation is the first nation. The British were the second. The Americans are the third. So when we look for a place for our ancestors, it's got to transcend these government changes that you guys do. Because we basically had one government the whole time, but you guys have this habit of switching up on it. We don't mind. We love the democracy. We really do. And we want you all to vote and support this democracy because it came from us. If you guys come up with a new form of government, it will not be from us unless it descends from the democracy. So we want you to keep your democracy strong. We're asking you to do that. And in recognition of our treaties, especially the 1682 Treaty in Philadelphia, which stated that we would be two separate nations traveling side by side, parallel into the future, helping each other in the spirit of brotherly love. We still abide by that treaty. We're here to help you. Seriously.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I've learned so much. I didn't know any of this, I think, before, and I appreciate it because I'm going to look into it more. I work with the Frederick County Attorney's Office, and the best way I know to get this all taken into account in our planning is to go to one of our county council members, propose legislation. If it's in our code, we will do it. You know what I mean? The planners, the zoning ordinance, will have to take those kind of things into account. Now, we're working on a new historic preservation ordinance that is taking a lot of the archaeological kinds of things into account and protecting them, you know, not just for Native Americans, but for any other kind of archaeological information or you know, historical type things. So there's a real chance, I think, especially at Frederick County, to go in there now and say, you're looking at this, you're sort of, we even have a new statement we're working on to say something like, we've taken things away from people. We want to try to fix that, you know? So I think it's a great time to get in touch with local council members. Okay.
Because I don't know the council members and I don't know what the legislation would look like. So if you could work with us, that would be fabulous.
Okay.
No, we're good. Next.
Any questions? Oh, one real quick. So I want to leave you with this one story because you guys are planners, so you'll probably appreciate this, all right? And this story is also historical because the Tayaks, all right, so Native Americans have usually about a dozen clans per tribe, all right? Now, to understand the clan system, all right, each clan is inspired by an animal, like rabbit or turtle or beaver or turkey, all right? So the reason why the clans exist is so that we can operate similar to nature, so that we have people who are representing the natural world in our meetings and taking the perspective, so to speak, of those animals. So if we have a meeting, we're going to hear from the wolves, we're going to hear from the rabbits, we're going to hear from the deer, we're going to hear from the turkeys, each with a different perspective, and we're taking all that into consideration before making a decision. So the Tayak family comes from the Beaver clan. The Tayak is often referred to as the Great Beaver. That's because the beaver has excellent leadership characteristics within Native American communities. Now, I'm going to tell you this story and then think again about your children and how important this story is. Because you see, in this part of the world, right, a long time ago, the beaver was as tall as any man. In fact, beaver was also highly intelligent and very spiritual. Beavers had the ability to improve their environment and make it hospitable for other animals. Beavers also have families that all come together and work together to build excellent housing and lodges. And the lodges beavers built were so well constructed that they were cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Beaver didn't have to go out and gather wood like the human beings because they had beautiful fur that kept them warm as well as dry. Beaver also had large, sharp teeth, which it would fell tall trees, and it would leave those trees for us because beaver took pity on the human beings, the two-legged, and we could use those trees for canoes and bows and things like that. Beaver never asked for anything in return for felling those big trees. It saw how we struggled with trees, right? All beaver would ask for is some of the soft bark, from the tree that it would gnaw on in the winter. Because in the summer, as you know, beavers are at the bottom of the lakes and rivers digging for roots. Beavers also made excellent canals and roadways that made transportation much easier back in the day. And they shared all those canals and roadways with all of their neighbors without charge. The early human beings in this part of the world learned a great deal from studying beaver. For example, beavers would bathe 2 and 3 times a day. Soon, the human beings started bathing 2 and 3 times a day. Beaver raised excellent children. Their children were industrious and ambitious, but also respectful. Soon, the human beings began adopting the parenting style and skills of beaver. Beaver would work hard to do projects that would benefit the entire community. They did not fight, they did not quarrel among themselves, and beavers did not make enemies of their neighbors. They experienced no jealousy at the success of other people. And so, as time came to pass, beaver became more prosperous than the human beings. And so, the early Indians, the Anishinaabe, they sent a delegation to the Creator, and they said to Creator, you have to do something to return things to the normal way. We, the human beings, are supposed to be number one. and they demanded that Creator do something to stop the power and the stature of beavers. Well, Creator thought and said, if the human beings need an advantage in order to prosper more than beaver, then I will reduce the stature of beaver, and I will make it so that beavers only want to live in and around the water. Well, the early human beings were pleased at that news and returned to their lodges, knowing they had no more competition from beaver. Now, beavers did not diminish all at once, but each generation grew smaller than the last until the beavers became the size that they are today. But Creator allowed beaver to retain all of its previous skills. Beavers still work together to build habitats that include their extended family. They are still affectionate and considerate and kind. They do not fight, nor do they quarrel among themselves, and have only a few enemies. Of course, beaver's greatest enemy is man. Man, who learned so much from our little brother. But we never learned the most important lesson of all, which is that of building inclusive communities. Because if you're going to build an inclusive community, you can't be jealous at the success of others. And that, to us, is the root of so much of slavery and everything else. Thank you.
To bring that story in today's world, everybody knows about all the wildfires in California and how devastating they've been. There are some little spots of land that were never touched by those wildfires that still have green grass and still grow fresh trees. And that is the land of the beaver.
Oh.
The area that the beaver had, the wildfire couldn't penetrate because the moisture of the ground is so great it wouldn't burn. So we could still learn a lot from the story that he told, even today. And even today, we as Indigenous people look to our original stories to help us with what goes on today. The stories of the eagle, stories of the bear, stories of the deer, the groundhogs, everything, from the ones that fly in the sky to the ones that walk on the land to the ones that live under the land and the ones that swim in the waters, can teach us. And we need to learn those lessons so that we can continue to be a great state and allow these things to thrive and allow these things to prosper so that we can have those deer in 50, 60 years instead of them being all killed off because of land development or overhunting. Even the problems with foxes and coyotes, they're important to the ecosystem. Okay? But because of man going as far as they have with land development, you've taken away their homes. Where are they supposed to go? We have to learn from these things. There are ways that we can live with them and prosper. But are they people willing to listen and learn?
That's what we're going to do. We're going to advocate for the insects and the animals and the land when you bring us in. We're going to speak for the voiceless ones. That's what we do.
One of the most important insects is the bee.
Yeah.
Without the bee, these fields don't grow. Without the bee, the woods don't grow. Without the bee, those pretty flowers that everybody see that are wildflowers don't exist anymore. So these are the things that we need to learn, relearn, and incorporate to everyday planning so that this state can continue to be as beautiful.
Yep.
How many states in this nation have a waterway like the Chesapeake? Not many. How many states in this nation have as many trees and flowers and stuff growing, aquatic animals and deer and all that like we do? Not many. Let's keep it going.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that all can survive. Because the standing people who are the trees to the four-leggeds, we all need to go coexist together and not just push them out because we need housing or a new warehouse or a new shopping center. So these are the things we need to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Good question. In the back. Yeah, we recognize you're not going anywhere, so this stuff is part of your inheritance. All of our stories and stuff, you have to help us keep these things alive, by advocating for them. They belong to you as well as us. We're the keepers of them, but we believe that by sharing, we all can win. So we want to share with you.
So I wanted to follow up on the theme of relearning. So I'm loving that. As part of the bipartisan infrastructure law funding, we want to be offering an indigenous knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge fellowship next year. So I'd love to follow up and see what opportunities, how we might be going about that to capture the kind of the wisdom and the stories and help us apply it in addition to the traditional scientific knowledge that we're doing, particularly around forest management, invasive species management, how we're living on the land.
Yeah. We think that promoting this culture will interest your young people. We really do. So we're grateful for this fellowship because we struggle with PlayStation and cell phones just like you do with kids. It's impossible. Be done, yeah.
Thank you so much. No, this is great. I think a lot of us learned things that we never knew before. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.